Good morning, all. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Very good morning to all. So we are starting our reading club with the prayer.
भेद भाव अपने दिल से साफ कर सके, दोस्तों से भूल हो तो माफ कर सके, झूठ से बचे रहे, सच कदम भरे, दूसरों के जैसे पहले खुद को जय करे, हमको मन की शक्ति देना, मुश्किलें पड़े तो हम पर हित न कर्म कर, साथ दे तो धर्म का, चले तो धर्म पर, खुद पे हौसला रहे, बदी से ना डरे, दूसरों के जैसे पहले खुद को जय करे, हमको मन की शक्ति देना।
Good morning, all. Giving tribute to our great master, Dr. Samuel Hahnemann, for wonderful divine science and taught us dare to be wise. Seeking blessings from our Guru, Dr. Prafull Vijayakar, sirs, who have made this divine science and learned to understand with the mathematical certainty. Jai Hanuman, Jai Homeopathy, Om Vijaykaraya Namah. So, friends, we are reading the wisdom of Dr. Samuel Hahnemann from the sixth editions of Organon of Medicines, along with the reading of Genetic Materia Medica by Dr. Prafull Vijayakar, sir. So, up till now in Organon of Medicines, we have understood the aspect of knowledge of disease up to 170 aphorism. It is a theoretical part followed by the understanding the knowledge of disease with the understanding of the miasm And we also learn the understanding of miasm in modern science, light of modern science, with the understanding of Dr. Vijayakar sir. Along with that, we understood the case taking part, how to elicit the symptoms from the patients. Then we understood how the pathogenetic power of the medicines is producing in the form of drug proving. And the third point, which Master Hahnemann has given in Organ of Medicines, that is the employment of that pathogenetic power of medicines on the symptom totality of the patient. That is called approach of the disease. And up till now, we have covered that. So we will continue this in In the process of learning this, yesterday we have seen that what Master Hahnemann has told in aphorism number 148, that if we apply the knowledge of medicines, and if we know the symptom totality of the patients of the natural disease, and if both are the same as applying the law of similia, then health must ensue. But this process is something called as a laborious. So in footnote number 108, Master Hahnemann is giving us the idea about this. So, but this laborious, sometimes very laborious search for the selections of the homeopathic remedy most suitable in every respect to each morbid state is an operation which, notwithstanding all the admirable books for facilitating it, still demand the study of original sources themselves, and at the same time a great amount of circumspections and serious deliberations, which have their best reward in the consciousness of having faithfully discharged our duty. How could his laborious, care-demanding task, by which alone the best way of curing disease is rendered possible, please the gentlemen of a new mongrel sect, who assume the honorable name of homeopathist, and even seems to employ a medicine in the form and appearance homeopathic, but determine upon them anyhow, and who, when unsuitable remedy does not immediately give relief, in place of laying the blame on their unpardonable ignorance and laxity in performing the most important and the serious of all human affairs, ascribe it to the homeopathy, which they accuse is of the gentle, great imperfections. If the truth be told, its imperfection consists in this, that the most suitable homeopathic remedy for each morbid condition does not spontaneously fly into their mouth like a roasted pigeon without any trouble on their own part. However, they know from a frequent practice how to make up for the inefficiency of scarcely half homeopathic remedy by the employment of the allopathic means that comes much more handy to them, among which one or more dozen of leech applied to the affected part, a little harmless vivisections to the extent of the 8 ounce, and so forth, play an important part, and should the patient, in spite of all this, recover, they extol their vivisections, leech, etc., alleging that had it not been for this, the patient would not have been pulled through, and they give us to understand in no doubtful language that these operations, derived without much exercise of the genius from the pernicious routine of the old school, in reality contributed the best share toward the cure. But if the patient die under the treatment, as not frequently, that means as frequently happen, they seek to console the friends by saying that they themselves were witness that everything conceivable had been done for the lamented deceased. Who would do this frivolous and pernicious tribe the honor to call them, after the name of very laborious but a salutary art, homeopathic physicians? May the just recompense await them, that when taken ill, they may be treated in the same manner. So this is what a very, very important footnote by Master Hahnemann, that the task of getting the remedy, the similimum, it is not easy. Okay, so you have to do work on that, and that is what Dr. Vijayakar has made a mathematical certainty to understand and getting the similimum from the uh, understanding the persons from the genetic perspective. So when we understand this and we apply this, then we are getting the real cure. But what Master Hahnemann knows about that, he said that there are the people, so there are the homeopaths, they call themselves a homeopath, but in real sense, when the emergency or something is happening, at that time they use the allopathic mode of treatment according to their conveniency, and then they apply and they call themselves it is a homeopath. And this is what they tell, that this disease is not cured by the homeopathy. It is not the limitations of the homeopathy, it is the limitations of the himself. So they blames others, or they blame the pathy for them, and that is what master knows about that. And he also says that it is not easy to get the remedy into your mouth unless and until you are doing the wonderful work. And if the patient dies out of this allopathic pernicious treatment, and they say that it is something that we have done everything for the patient, but we failed. So this is what something Master Hahnemann warned us. So it is very difficult task, but you have to do this task to get. And Dr. Vijayakar has made easy like mathematics, that when you understand the genetics in the proper terms, then you get the remedy easy. So in aphorism number 149, continuing that what Master Hahnemann is giving wisdom to us, the disease of the long standing and especially such as are of the complicated character. What is the meaning of that complicated character? Is something that the disease is produced by the artificial allopathic or other mode of treatment and complicated the patient. So in these cases, it require their cure a proportionately longer time. So this is what master knows about that. More especially do the chronic medicinal dyscrasia, so often produced by allopathic bungling, along with the natural disease, left uncured by it, require a much longer time for their recovery. Often indeed are they incurable in consequence of the shameful robbery of the patient's strength and juices by using the vivisections, purgatives, and the pernicious treatment given on the basis of the empty and the false theories for alleged usefulness in case of the disease appearing similar also in prescribing unsuitable mineral bath, etc. The principal feat performed by allopathy under it is called as method of treatment. So this is, we all know, in a pandemic of the COVID, initially what they claim that clinical trial of these medicines help to get rid of this, and then another remedy has been used, then another remedy has been used, and then a lot of medicine has been prescribed on the basis of that, the false theory. And then this is they called as this is the method of treatment, but actually it is not the method of treatment, and they produce a chronic medicinal dyscrasia. So after COVID, you may have found most of the patients who suffer from the hyperglycemic syndrome or a non-producing symptoms of the diabetes, but when you go for the reporting, you find that the sugar was more than 200. And another, you can see the patients nowadays, that the patients of the avascular necrosis of the hip joint due to the chronic medicinal dyscrasia often produced by allopathic bungling. So this is what something you have to understood. And in this case, if you apply our homeopathic mathematics, it takes little longer time to recover, but it can. So this is what the wisdom of Master Hahnemann telling us to understand the man and the disease process and applications of the homeopathic medicine to the disease process. As you all know, we have started the understanding of genetic materia medica. Since 3 days, I am talking about and genetics. So the question comes into your mind that what is the meaning of genetic materia medica and why it is we have to learn. So today we are understanding the methodology and process about this book, that how this book is made and what is the understanding at the level of genetics. So the few point regarding this book, why I am giving you introductions, because this is very helpful to understand this book and to apply this knowledge into your clinical practice. So this is the first volume of the 4 volume series. This volume contains the 4 group and the 21 remedies. These are the Materia Medica picture based on my experience, that is Dr. Vijayakar sir experience, and image derived from the rubrics and the provings for the last 32 years, 33 years of sir's practice. This is not a general type of Materia Medica. There are almost 200 books on the Materia Medica. This book is not just a collection of the Materia Medica. It has been observed that many a times Materia Medica get confusing. So to make it easier for the student and practitioner to remember, we have made certain changes like first, the outline of Materia Medica is based on dispositions, that is the timid dispositions and the right side affinity of the remedy. So when you go to this understanding of this book, so you find that this is the four group and the 21 remedy comes under this dispositions only. The right-sided plus timid remedy. So right-sided remedy are generally supposed to be very positive, aggressive, and sensitive, as we know the understanding of the side. However, this book includes four groups which are timid and right-sided as an exception. So when you find out some exceptions with the right-sided affections like a timidity, then you think of this type of remedy. So understanding of the remedy, the hypothetical correlations like the calcarea with the chalk, etc. The rubric have been put at many places to make the student of Materia Medica rubric friendly. So rubrics are given in the box format where the 3 marks are written in the capital bold, 2 marks in the italics, and 1 marks in the simple. This will help students to remember the rubric of that remedy as well as help them to interpret behavior into rubric. So when we are going through this book, we will see in the box the rubric, and the rubric is the understanding of the situations or understanding of the person's symptoms. Clinical presentations, how a particular remedy behave in the clinic, and from how to find out the rubric has been given under the heading in the clinic. Then the miasmatic reflections, the most important aspect of Dr. Vijayakar's USP is the miasm understanding in light of modern science. So miasmatic reflections is the unique portions of the Materia Medica as Sir believe that every remedy and its symptoms, whether they are natural trait or a disease symptoms arising from the genetic code of the person. There is a distinct and a confirmed relationship of the childhood nature of the persons and the nature of the persons in the adulthood and the nature of the persons in the old age. Again, the age factor when we have read the book on miasm, we can see that in the childhood the person can be soric, in the middlehood the person can become psychotic, and in old age the person goes into deteriorating state, leading to syphilitic presentations of the miasm. So this is what you have to understood in this process. There is a distinct relationship between the nature of the persons and his disease because of prevailing miasm, and this makes every remedy a triamiasmatic one. An attempt has been made to show the influence of the miasm on an individual signs and the symptoms and the nature, and therefore resulting in almost three different pictures of the every remedy, like the calcarea will be anxious and anticipatory in the soric stage, the fearful in the psychotic stage, and wherein it adapts the protective covers of the mother, family, money, and God, and ultimately in the syphilitic stage where it produces the symptoms of the clinging, confusions, and insanity. So when we understood these evolutions or the understanding of the evolutions of the miasm in each and every remedy, then our use of this remedy is mathematical. So miasmatic reflections is shown just to emphasize a single trait of the person going through and through from the sora to psychosis to the syphilis, exhibiting a different reactions in the respective miasm. The 7th point in this book is the entry points are the point which attract our attention to the particular group of remedy or to a particular drug. Physical, generals, and the mental entry point have been emphasized, which makes us start thinking of the particular drug. And the resume, to make it short, the resume of the every remedy has been written in the triad form to remember remedy easily. Rule out a remedy, it is very easy to fit a remedy forcibly, but the best simillimum is that which cannot be ruled out. Hence, the ruling out point have been given in every remedy. At some places, it has been mentioned what may not rule out a remedy. Then the chart, flow chart of the quick reference and the quick differentiations and the slide have been put to easily remember the remedy. At some places, the symptoms have been repeated to emboss them on the mind. Ample of the cases have been put as an examples. A uniform layout has not been maintained in all remedy for a better remembering and a photographic recall. Each group has been represented in its own natural flow. So this is what something about this book. And now we are starting with the understanding of the genetics. So what is the genetics and why genetics is most important and why we are dealing with this? Because in the light of the modern science, when you are dealing with the allied persons or you are dealing with the conventional medicinal persons, when you talk about the genetics, he can understand it in a better perspective. So this is what Dr. Vijayakar wanted us to learn the genetics, and out of that we have to apply our knowledge of homeopathy and prescribe to this. So today we are studying about some of the theoretical part, but it also help us to understand this theory and then it is applications into our practice. So genetics, for those who are not acquainted with the science of genetics, here are the resume of the same. So this is what, not whole genetics, but this is what Dr. Vijayakar wanted to understand the basic and the short form of this genetics. So in the present times of the stem cell theory, the modern science has reached a stage where doctors are in the process of creating an organ in the body with the help of a few pluripotent cells and based upon their knowledge of the genetic predetermine the physical makeup of a newborn. There was a strong need for the improvisations and the scientific understanding of the homeopathy. This is the need, that's why we have understood that homeopathy and the genetics. Each and every aspect of the patient and his tendency has its origin in the genetic code of the every individual. And this is exactly what gives rise to individualization. So from the day one, what Master Hahnemann is telling that you need to prescribe the medicine to individual and with the individual characteristic. So that is what the law of similia. So here the individualization is based on the understanding of the individual genetic code. A drug that represents and matches the characteristic of the genetic code of an individual can be called as a genetic constitutional simillimum, more correctly, the genetic constitutional stimulum. So this is what something that we are going to stimulate the genetics of the constitutions, and the constitution will take care of everything and it will resolve and heal the patient from inside at the level of genes. It is the predictive school of homeopathy that is making use of these recent scientific advances in the understanding of the human body and the system of the homeopathy, thus advocating most updated and the genetic based homeopathy. So this is what the benefit of this. There are the homeopathic, but they cannot understand what is the gene. So what are the gene and what is this genetic base of homeopathy? So to understand this is very important. So genes are the functional unit of the inheritance, as we all know that they are the blueprint of the physical and the mental makeup of the man. So each gene is a nucleic acid sequence that carries information representing a particular protein, and the protein are the building block of everything in our body, like a bones, teeth, hair, earlobes, muscles, etc. This protein help our body to grow, work properly, and stay healthy. The scientists today estimated that each genes in the body may make as many as 10 different proteins. That's over 3 lakhs proteins. Genetics allow us to understand the ever continuing development of the life. The evolutions of the life mean the appearance of the hello, am I audible? Yeah, great. Something wrong with the Zoom, so connection has been lost suddenly. Okay, fine. Am I visible or audible to all?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine, great. So I'm sharing again the screen. So continuing from this, genetics allow us to understand the ever continuing development of the life. The evolutions of the life mean the appearance of the self-replicating molecules, which could transmit the characteristic of the life from to future generations. This self-responding DNA molecule is not concentrated in the particular part of the body, but it present in every animal or the plant cell. At the adulthood, the human are made up of the trillion cell, but the conceptions that this existed only a single cell embryo. So this is what from single cell the DNA is happen. How does this happen? Within this single cell, the DNA molecule was present that held the genetic code for the constructions of the human being. The genetic information carried by the genes is stored in a chemically coded form. One gene is a section of the DNA that has information to make a particular type of the protein. These proteins are expressed as a physical, mental, and the disease makeup of the every individual. Some genes tells the cell in the embryo whether they should grow into an arm or a leg. Genes are the things that determine the physical traits, the various other constitutional traits about us. They carry informations that help to make us who are we and how we look. Our hair structure, curly or a straight, our legs long or short, even our smile and all that passes through the generations of our family into genes. So this visible perceptible characteristic in an individuals are known as the phenotypes, while those that are responsible for such characteristic are the genotypes. So this is what the basic understanding of the genes. The science of the genes has progressed so much that the genetic code determining the specific constitutional trait have been identified. Everything from the color and the texture of the skin, the lining of the respiratory digestives and the urinary systems, the mesodermal origins like the bone structures, ligaments, tendons, the blood to the heart, lung, kidney, various endocrine glands, and the nervous systems, all are manifestations of the genetic code of the individual and are influenced by it. The human DNA molecule contains approximately 1 million genes. Our body is made up of and runs on the protein so that they are extremely important. If something goes wrong in making of the protein, for example, the gene has a defect, it causes a disease, dysfunctions, or the death. So the most recent research finding in and around the world have correlated the thinking capacity of the individual with the genetics. We always knew that the emotions that we feel are the result of the various protein in the form of neurotransmitter, which are again under the direct influence of the genetics. A gene is stable entity but can suffer a change in the sequence. Such a change is called as the mutations. So when there is a mutation has happened, as revealed by the phenotypic mutations, some phenotypic traits are determined by the single genes, while others are determined by the several genes. So some features are altered only in cases of specific gene mutations, while other can be affected by the mutation of the one of several genes. So this is what very important. For example, a complex changes in the phenotype can result from the single mutations. So there is a single mutations and there is a multiple mutations. A classical examples of a deleterious mutations that exert its effect by the interfering in the metabolic pathway is phenylketonuria. The disease result from this essential attribute of the genes were defined by Dr. Mendel. So when we understanding the phenylalanine, the amino acids converting enzyme goes to amino acid tyrosine, so it gives rise to a good intelligent brain. But if the converting enzyme gene is absent, then phenylalanine is accumulated more, and it converted into phenylpyruvic acid. And when this phenylpyruvic acid is there more in the cells, it produces a mental retardations and weak, dull brain. So this is what something that one gene is not expressed at the converting enzyme, giving rise to a change in the process or change in the called as a cellular mechanism. So this is what something you have to understand. So when we are giving a certain remedy, we are correcting these genes, and after that corrections, the harmonious function will happen. And we have seen that the mental retarded patients become dependent, from dependent to independent in our camp cases. So this is what something that our homeopathy can do for this. So this is what you have to understand, the depth of homeopathy at the genetic level, and it act on this particular protein part. A gene may exist. There is something, the internet connections has been disturbing today. I don't know how. A gene may exist in the alternative form that determine the expressions of the same particular characteristic, like the blue or the brown color of the human eye. These forms or genes are called as alleles. These alleles have no permanent effect on each other when present in the same organism, but segregate unchanged and pass in the individual reproductive cells. So this is what you have to understand. The mother has some genes, father has some genes. So there is a possibility that one child having a complete process of genes, then uh, 50% of the child having the carrier, and one child can be a normal one. This is what the representatives of the cystic fibrosis case. When after conception this allele meet to form a newborn, it will be the dominant allele which will present itself, and the innate characteristic of the individual will develop accordingly. In the same way, the recessive allele will remain no expressive and may be expressed in the progeny of organism under susceptible environmental influence. So there are two type of genes. One is the expressive genes and one is called as the recessive genes. Sometimes the recessive genes are there, but under some susceptible environmental influence, the genes get activated and it produces a disease. So proteomics is the recent advancement in the world of the genetics and the molecular biology. The scientists here are claiming that it is not the genes which are responsible for the constitutional characteristic of individual, but the proteins which are encoded by these genes. This protein synthesized to give certain mental characteristics like the anger, timidity, sadness, mortification, joy, etc. act in the human body individually and in combinations. The scientists have proved that various such combinations are responsible for various illnesses in the persons, and they are now changing the name of this science for the genomics to the proteomics. An article in the Times of India dated 12 Feb 2001 stated that advance in the proteomics would give a new understanding of the various diseases suffered by the mankind. So effort will be made to make the diagnosis of the deficient protein component resulting in the particular disease condition, thus introducing a change in the present principle of the treatment of the modern medicine. Today, in the world of the modern medicines, efforts are being made to make the diagnosis of the disease by the various techniques like imaging, CT scan, MRI, PET scan, but no effective date were indicated toward the searching for the cause of the disease presentations, and that too in the proteins and the genes. But nowadays, the genetics has been advanced so that the karyotyping and the genetics study has been done, and to understand that it is because of this protein has been involved in this case. The discovery of proteomics will be revolutions in the therapeutic principle of the modern medicines. The doctor in the future, what Vijayakar sir predicted, that the doctor in the future will be trying to find the combinations of the protein synthesized in the patient to diagnose a disease and cure it. Also, it is written the homeopaths have been taking a history of all the symptoms that are related to the synthesis of the protein and prescribing on it. So that is what, when we are taking this into considerations, we can cure this disturbances. It was Dr. Hahnemann who had such understanding of the human body, and what homeopaths are doing is nothing short of proteomics. Though we are following the principle based on these recent advances, because of our ignorance, we are not able to make a name in the world of modern medicine when we are actually practicing this postmodern art and the science, what Dr. Vijayakar sir is telling us. So the genetic understanding of the human being. So this is what the general understanding of the genetics and proteomics. But the genetic understanding of the human being, in order to make a genetic based prescriptions, it is very important for us to understand the presentations of the genes in the human body. This can only be done if we follow the specific pattern and the system of questionnaires in every case. So everything from the thinking process to emotion to the look, to expression to the disease presentations are all the representations of the genes, but the protein that are being coded will govern the presentations of the gene by it. Also, it will depend upon the underlying fundamental defense process, which we called as the miasm. So to understand the gene of the man, we have to understand the gene at the level of the psyche level, which we call as the mental makeup, to understand the gene at the physical level, to make a physical structure of the body, to understand the gene or at the general level, that means the sensitivity and tolerance of the individual, and to understand the genetics at the level of disease part, that means how the person having adapted to certain disease and their defense mechanism. So to understand the man, we have to look for these are the few points, and this slide is very important to understand the man. So when we think about the mental makeup, that means some of the genes which is expressing and some of the genes which is not expressive. So it gives rise to the expressions at the level of the psyche and expression at the level of the non-expression at the level of the psyche will give us two type of personality which we called as the introvert and extroverted. Then we have a will, intellect, moral, sensitivity, and emotional reactions, and the conscience as the genes is working toward the betterment of everything. So their work is the conscience at the level of genes. So this is what the mental makeup is considering. The physical makeup gives rise to our physical structure of the body, of the muscles, build, posture, height, face type, and hair and external appearance. The general makeup gives rise to the sensitivity. So this sensitivity gives rise to the speed, tolerance, side affections, stability, and how we adapt with the environment in terms of the thermal thrust, food, and sleep and discharges. So this is what the general makeup of the genes. And the disease makeup, that means we are considering the defense of the disease in terms of the three process called as the miasm. And that miasm in modern light is called as a sura, represent as inflammatory changes. The psychosis represent as some of the growth changes in the body, and syphilis represent in terms of destructions or the ulcerations at the level of cellular mechanism. Mental makeup, the genetics of the behavior and the unconscious mental processes. No mental or physical activity or behavior is random or meaningless. So this is very important that you have to understand. No mental, no physical activity or behavior is random or the meaningless. All the mental and physical activity are the meaningful, purposeful, and connected with the previous life experience as a defense to stimuli, and these are genetically determined. So when you understand this behavior of the person because of certain proteins are expressing in terms of that, and that is what you have to understand. Say for example, I am giving you some of the emotional example and the behavior. If you see a person is very vivacious, cheerful, extroverted type of personality and goes into a vivacity and hilarity, and after that they goes into insane state and goes into laughing and giggling and everything. So in that case you have to understand this uh, persons is represented with the excess of the dopamine giving rise to happy hormones, and that happy hormones is not in control giving rise to the certain behavior. The same way when we think of the person who goes into a state of the sadness or the depressions, so in that case the representations of the protein which we called as the serotonin neurotransmitter which acting in this case, and that gives rise to a sadness, depressions, and the morose kind of personality. So this is something you have to understand, that every behavior or every physical or mental process is a meaningful, purposeful, and connected with their previous life experience. And this is what the defense of that particular individual, and it is governed by the genes only. So all this defense emerges towards of anxiety and the maintained sense of the safety, well-being, and self-esteem. From this, different miasmatic drug pictures of the same drug arises. Some of the automatic behavior. So this auto behavior, these are the automatic behavioral traits seen in every individual, whether he notice it or not. So for example, if the child is very restless in the womb and comes after birth also he is restless, so that is what the restlessness is, something that is patient cannot aware of that thing, but you can observe that thing. This is the automatic behavior of the person. So these are arising from the basic genetic trait, like a shy girl looking down or away from other people, like easy startling tendency from the slightest note, fidgety of the finger or restlessness of the leg, etc. All these are the unconscious state or the actions due to the basic genetic trait of being bashful, timid, or restless, respectively. So this develop over a years and become an inherent part of the person's nature and form a vital clue for a homeopath in determining the simillimum. So this is what you have to observe and determine the simillimum, because this is non-disease type of characteristic and it has to be have a genetic origin. This automatic behavior can be seen as a physical movement, speech, activity, and the gait. So physical movement, so you can see the person is very hurried, hasty, or sometimes you find that the person comes to your clinic many a time, but he always stumbles and fumbles in the clinic, so awkwardness, or the character of the person is very graceful and disciplined, or sometimes the person is expressed physically in the form of foolish or idiotic, or his look physically is aristocratic or self-sufficient. So when you observe these things as a very physically very mild, obsequious, or a arrogant type of, or effeminate, or a mannish, etc. So this is something, this movement giving rise to a genetic expression. When you think about, when you listen to the persons, or when you observing the person's speech, you can find out the speech can be hasty, slow, stammering, or a feminine speech which having a effeminate or manly in the woman, or a nervous, abrupt, short, or reflective, witty, or sometimes you have to understand how what he wanted to convey to us as in the form of jokes, jestings, or his expressions of the anxiety, anguish, cheerful, or he wanted to make a sarcasms, or which we call as a verses makes and everything. So this is something you have to understand, that this is the expressions of that each and every genetics. So this is something you have to observe, and this is automatic in behavior. So you can take into considerations as a non-disease characteristic, but that is very helpful in deciding the simillimum. The introvert and the extrovert, this is the most innate characteristic of the genetic presentations in individual, as in analog to the genetics where some of the genes are expressive which are dominant while the other are not expressed, as known as a recessive. So also in the human there are many individuals who are introverted and do not express and share much of their feelings with the others, and some are very extroverted and would mix up and express their feeling very comfortably with all. So when looking into this, we have to see that the introvert can be having a timid quality, the abrupt quality, the haughty quality, the secretive quality, the stasis, there is indifference or aversion to being disturbed, or having a dull intellect goes into introversion. Whereas the extroverted personality can be very vivacious, the wondering, the jesting, the childish behavior sometimes, the boaster, the worthlessness, or erotic or lewd or open-hearted. So these are the few expressions of introverted or extroverted. The will, so when we understanding the will has been defined as the faculty by which a person decide on the and initiate the action. So this is what, when the person is in danger, there Their will is the only process that gives rise to decide what to do and how to overcome this. So on the basis of this, when there is a crisis, the will is giving you a idea. So, thus, there can be a people with the positive will and the negative will based on how they adapt to the crisis, and when in the crisis, if they adapt to certain extent in terms of the positivity or in terms of the negativity, so you have a certain ability of the person. So this means the strong or the weak personality, respectively. The presentations of the wheel symptoms in any individual will depend upon the fundamental miasm of the individual. So consideration of the wheel is very important criteria in the selections of the genetic minimum, as it is one of the most fundamental innate characteristic of individual. So that is what very important. The actual wheel can be elicited best from an individual by asking them the reactions in crisis and also understanding the step taken by them to avoid this crisis. So this is very important. So wheel can be determined when you have to have put the patient into a crisis. So if the person having of a positive will, he can be very courageous, he can be positive, he can be audacious, or his will is obstinate, or he can remain perseverance or pertinacity to certain point of time, or sometimes he make plans to come out of this, or he is very optimistic or hopeful. But if the will is of a negative origins, then they goes into a timidity, they goes into bashfulness, their weak-willed or irresolution cannot decide, their confidence is shaking or want of, goes into anxiety and the fearful reactions, or sometimes goes into embarrassment or despair or leading to the suicidal thoughts. So this is what something you can think of, that how the persons behave in the crisis and what was her reactions. So the will in the calcarea is compromised, and that is the reason at the mental level we have symptoms like a timidity, confident want of, and fearful, etc. Symptom like the obstinacy, courageous, as has been presented in calcarea self, is because of the psychotic defense. So this is what you have to understand the persons. Then the sensitivity, when a stone falls on the glass, it breaks, but if it is falls on the wood or the metal, it will not. So this is what something that some persons having a certain sensitivity. Depending upon their genetic presentation, the sensitivity is different. So this shows that the glass is sensitive to stone, but the wood and metals are not. The same way, the different remedies are genetically sensitive to certain things and not sensitive to the others. Some are sensitive to money matters, some are respect, and some are ego, being hurt, etc. The sensitivity belongs to the remedy, but the reactions of this sensitivity depending upon the fundamental miasm is presented. So we have to look for the certain sensitivity of the individual. Either person is sensitive to the rudeness, sensitive to the criticism, sensitive to the insult, sensitive to the reprimands or opinion of the others, what other will think about, sensitive to injustice, or sensitive to joke, cannot take a joke, or sensitive to slight surprise, or a joy, or excitement, or sensitive to sad story, or some of the sensual or moral impressions. So this is what you have to take into considerations when you are thinking the individual at the genetic level. The intellect part, the intellect also gives us, so these are the phenomena what Dr. Kent has given to understand the man: will, intellect, moral, attachment, and sensitivity and emotions. So intellect can be defined as the faculty of the reasoning and understanding objectively. So it is the person's thinking capacity, another innate characteristic of every individual, which is presentations of the genes. So intellect is the genetically governed. This tells us about the understanding of the individual as also his ability to comprehend and react in the particular situations. So the intellect is needed for to handle the situations and how to adapt from the environment and survive in a better way. So if the person having no intellect, then he cannot survive in the environment. So this is what the intellect is, a genetic characteristic which was given by Almighty to all of us in the form of genes expressions. So intellect can be divided into two categories, and there is a good intellect, or we call it as the intellectuals, or the poor intellect, which is the dull. So in intellect giving right to memory, reasonings, understanding, and thinking capacity. So there is a memory is full, memory active, uh, easy comprehensions, and on the basis of that, they have certain sharpness of the mind, so everything will help you to understand and logically and the reasoning and the thinking. So you can have a good ability to learning everything. So your reading desire for mathematical aptitude for calculations and everything. When this intellect has been compromised in certain individuals, so gives rise to a weakness of the memory, forgetfulness, the idiocy or a mistake makes in many forms, or due to that intellectual disability their behavior has been changed in the form of the childish behavior, or if they cannot concentrate into it. So as we see that the intellect in the Baraita is compromised, whereas in Calcarea the will is compromised, in Baraita the intellect is compromised. So you have to understand this. The intellect in Baraita is compromised, and as a result of this everything is misplaced. So when we are reading Baraita, you can understand what is the meaning of misplace and what is the compromise at the level of intellect. This is because of the disproportionate growth taking place in the intrauterine life of the individual. The weak intellect and the misplaced manifestation is the key point of Baraita. So you have to remember this, very important. On the basis of this line, Sir has prescribed Baraita to many number of the patients and they get wonderful results. So this is what you have to keep in mind. This is the genetic expressions of the Baraita person. So weak intellect and the misplaced manifestation. Misplaced manifestation we will see in Baraita group. You will learn lot of example of that Baraita. So in day out you find Baraita people in your clinic. The morals, they are concerned with the good and the bad aspect of the human characters, and they are also concerned with the accepted rules and the standard of the human behavior and the virtuous conduct. This these are the values which are inculcated in the individual in the formative years, but not all individuals who are taught this moral imbibe them. Thus, there has been a certain protein that are responsible in every individual which is instrumental and inculcating these values. So this is giving rise to certain protein giving rise to a good morals and certain protein giving rise to a bad moral. So when we have a good moral, so they become very obedient, religious. They have anxiety, concerns of, and there is a reverence. It is not lack of, but it is a reverence and a benevolence. But when there is a bad moral, so moral want of disobedience, the behavior become insolent, impertinent. There is a lewdness, there is a lasciviousness, the criminal tendency, without remorse, and there is antisocial behavior or perverted behavior or hard-hearted and cruelty. So all this is giving rise to a bad moral. Conscience, we owe our very existence and functioning to the process of the synthesis. So in an organism like the human being, if the genes goes on expressing the characters in the form of the protein regularly, religiously, carefully, and conscientiously, the organism will be healthy, functioning to the best of its ability, and finally serving the purpose for which he has been put on this earth. So the conscience is the basic aspect. So in many a time, what Dr. Vijayakar sir has doing when they rule out and rule in of the patients at the end of, sir used to understand that this individual is conscientious or not. So if it is a conscientious, certain remedy has to be different, and if it is not conscientious, then remedy differentiation is there. So this is very important because it is a genetic innate characteristics. So if the genetic mechanism is working diligently, the constitution is fit enough to serve the purpose of existence, which we call as higher purpose of our existence. That means the progress. So diligence is thus a quality that makes an individual work for the progress, and progress requires sincere acquiring of the knowledge, and that can be put to use in a later life form of progress. So that is very, very important. So in diligent and conscientious, you may find a careful, thorough, meticulous, painstaking, and reliable and diligent personality. So this is what the gene expressions of the diligence. Emotions as a reaction to the situation. So this is very important that emotions are governed by the neurochemicals. So all emotions that we experience are the result of certain specific chemical neurotransmitters that are synthesized and released in the body. This synthesis result from the specific genetic coding in every individual. From the amount of this neurotransmitter they are synthesized and released, the individual experience the emotions. So, as we know, the basic emotions of the anger, sadness, grief, joy, fear, and contentment. What do you know? Need to ask Dr. Asif. So, emotions is expressed in the form of anger, sadness, grief, joy, fear, and the contentment. Okay, there is some issue in the internet, so it is something making I don't understand today because I am not at my home. I am somewhere else in the camp, so I am taking lecture from that place. So there is some internet issues, and because of this, it is happening. Yes, we are concluding today, and we will continue from tomorrow the physical makeup. So you will get more understanding from tomorrow onwards. So I am concluding today. So hope you understand that everything which is we are taking into consideration, as Dr. Kent has said about that, you have to take into consideration the will, intellect, morals, and everything. So that is something which we are considering the genes of the patient, which we are considering the genetic expressions of the patient. Then that is what Dr. Vijayakar has made this advancement of the modern science and understanding of our masters. So to understand this, we can understand man in a proper sense, and on the basis of that, we can apply our knowledge of materia medica, our knowledge of the remedies, and apply to the disease process, and the disease will be reversed. So this is what Dr. Vijayakar wanted us to be a mathematicians in the field of homeopathy. So thank you so much. I will conclude today's sessions here, and we will continue it from tomorrow. If you have any questions and query, we will have a 2 minutes so we can have a chat. Thank you so much, all. Hanuman bless you all the wisdom of this understanding and learning. Thank you all.